Hi, it's still me, Dan. I am still here in Texas, but today I am dressed differently. I'm a civilian, so last night marked 5 weeks and 1 day here in Texas, working as part of the COVID response crisis nurse thing. And as of this morning, I turned in my demobilization form and I am done. I have the hotel room until tomorrow at noon. Today I just slept, and then I got up, went back to bed, and I slept some more. Which is nice. I feel almost human for right now, which is good. In those 5 weeks and 1 day, I had 1 day off. So in that time, we had a hurricane. It wasn't a big hurricane. It was kind of like it was like a kid's version of my first hurricane. It wasn't like the worst storm ever, but it did provide some interesting obstacles. But overall, an interesting experience. So we have a lot to talk about today. So about the fact that I'm done, I'm a civilian again, and we're going to talk about more about Texas and what all happened here and the lessons I think that we need to take from that. I've had lots of people talking to me, asking me. I get a lot of questions about the differences between Texas and New York City. So I did 6 weeks there in New York City, so we're going to compare the 6 weeks in New York to the 5 weeks, 1 day here in Texas. I want to talk about the bigger picture and how all of that applies to America as a whole. And also some of the interesting interactions I've had with friends and just folks who see some of this crisis differently than I do. And some of the lessons that I think that I've learned from that. And of course, then what's next. So we're going to talk about that too. So first off, I guess about Texas, what are we going to talk about with that? I've not been doing a lot of videos over the last couple of weeks. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I've just been dead tired. I've just been trying to survive. People are like, God, how do you do 5 weeks and only have 1 day off, working 12-hour days and dealing with the stuff you're dealing with? Well, the trick is you just don't do anything else. Your life becomes pretty much totally all about working, and everything else is about just taking care of your basic needs to just keep working. So there's no extraneous BS. It's about trying to, get plenty of sleep, take care of yourself, and just keep moving forward and working. So, to do these videos, it doesn't take a lot of time. It's actually a little quicker than typing everything out, as part of a social media post. It's a little bit more efficient, but still it takes time. So, that's maybe, however long I sit here and yammer on, and plus the time to kind of get it set up to publish to YouTube and then to link it. If I'm quick and efficient, it's a half an hour. So, but that 30 minutes out of 10 hours that I have to sleep and rest and recoup, that's enough to make a difference. So I just haven't been doing it. To add to that, the company that I've been working for, they requested very formally that we maintain a very neat and tidy social media presence, and I respect that. I even if a person doesn't agree with everything that they're asked to do, I think I have a responsibility to follow the guidelines set forth, and if I can't do that, then I probably shouldn't be doing this. But at the same time, I agree with what they're saying. We do have a responsibility to maintain a a tidy social media presence. I think that's a fair way to put it. I'm not a representative of that company. I don't speak for them. I do not speak for the hospitals and health organizations in this region, and I shouldn't. I shouldn't try to. At the same time, I think that individuals can have a valid voice and lend perspective and valid information that can be helpful to the greater conversation. And to those ends, I do these videos. I try to be fair about it. I try to stay professional, and I try to the things that I think that are personal opinions, I will tell you I feel it's a personal opinion, and the other things I try to present as fact because I see them as fact. So there's that. What do we see? About some of that social media. One of the reasons that they asked that is because there were some people who had been here in this region who took it upon themselves to post some very harsh and I feel unfair things to social media. So this was an issue in New York City. It became an issue here. I don't want to go into too much detail about what was said because I don't really even know how real true it is. I do know that there's things that I've seen here that it's not ideal. But at the same time, we are literally in a healthcare emergency. We are in a crisis. We are dealing with a once in 100-year pandemic. It's the greatest public health emergency that our nation has faced in many generations. So there is no book on this. There is no proper way to say, this is what ideally should be. So when people see something and they say, well, look how terrible this is, well, that's not necessarily unreasonable because I've heard people, use the analogy that, you're trying to build a plane while you fly it, and that's pretty real. In many cases, we're seeing health systems that are strained to the point of breaking, and when things break, you still have the patient load, and you still have the crisis. And what I have seen firsthand is that when these things fail, I have seen professionals, administrators, health systems reply to that in the most efficient way they can. And I respect the fact that these people have said, okay, so this is something that's going on, we don't like it, what do we do about it? Well, these are our resources, this is how we fix this is how we move forward as best we can. And I think that's all you can ask of anybody. So what I have seen, I have found to be professional and appropriate, and to those ends, I think that the organization that I work with and the health system that I'm working for, I think that they deserve credit for doing a good job overall. So I wanted to say that. But what about the accountability? So you have to be accountable for when things go wrong, and I think overall that for the most part, these health systems are being accountable because they are trying to do the best they can. So what about Texas? Texas has been hard. I think that being here these 5 weeks was harder than the 6 weeks I had in New York. But it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison. And to make a fair comparison, I have to use a couple of different analogies. Texas and New York were just fundamentally very different. So how do we compare that? So how does something like this happen in the first place? You have to have sufficient numbers of cases and sufficient demand on a healthcare system in order to make it fail. And the failures that we saw in New York and Texas were very different. Ultimately, they're also the same. Too many patients for too few beds, too much demand for too little capacity. In New York City, you have some of the most densely populated real estate on earth. People live very close together in the area of, 20-mile radius. You literally have millions of people who are living there, and the burden on the system was incredible. And here you have more population spread, you have less density. But still, you saw a sustained level of transmission that caused health systems to fail. So I think that's interesting because, after New York, we were kind of all sitting around and we're all thinking, well, hey, how many other places can this happen? Well, this can't happen out in the country. This needs to be a really densely populated kind of an area to see this kind of problem. So we talked about Baltimore, we talked about Chicago, we talked about Atlanta, we talked about, all these like really dense metropolitan areas. And we thought, well, hey, maybe this can't happen out in the country. At least not like this. Well, this proved that it's wrong. We've seen stuff in the desert Southwest. We've seen things on Indian reservations. Now we're seeing this here in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. And there's some population density here, but it's just not in any way, shape, or form like New York City. But does that play a part? It might. I think maybe it does because we had, a different experience here in Texas. In New York City, I tell people that New York City was kind of like a tsunami. It was a tidal wave. You had this incredible spike, and we were just buried with work. And we had more work, more acuity, more patients stacked up everywhere than we could possibly handle. And because we were buried with so much so fast, it caused some really profound problems. I think that some of the numbers that we see, some of the lives lost, some of the bad outcomes, I think it's fair to assume that some of that is due to the fact that we just could only work so much so fast. If you have a huge number of people stuffed into an area that's only designed for so many people, it's bad things can happen pretty easily, and that's not a accusation or a failure of anyone in particular. That's just the situation being overwhelming. So here in Texas, it was less of a tidal wave. It was more like a flash flood or a giant flood. The water came up more slowly, and it stayed there. And so I and others were able to get here before the water got as high as it was going to get, and we were able to ride it all the way through. And now I think that, at least in this area where I'm about to leave, we're definitely through the worst of it. We're seeing much fewer positive cases. We're seeing less demand for COVID ICU beds, just less demand in general. There were, whole periods of time when the ER was carrying 5, 6, 7, 8 people that were vented ICU patients, and we would carry them for days at a time because there was just no capacity. Even though we had converted other other units to ICU. Just the numbers were such that there was just no place to put these folks. So the emergency room carried these people and provided care while we waited for rooms to show up and be available. And once we started moving those people and we opened up beds, we actually started decompressing some of the area hospitals, because the system here in this part of Texas uses more major hub hospitals to kind of service, I guess, spokes on a wheel, outlying freestanding hospitals. Some of these freestanding hospitals were maintaining people for long periods of time. And so they would be there for days and days and being held. And then we started getting those people transferred to the hospital I was at. So we started seeing this decompression of the entire system, which is good. Interestingly enough, after all that was done, now there's I guess a pop-up hospital here in the region where they have opened up, converted a convention center to hospital beds, which is interesting. I'm not sure who they're putting there, but hey, I'm afraid it's going to end up being like like the Billie Jean King Center or the hospital ship in New York, where some of that capacity was just not really usable in the way that it was hoped to be used. But that's a whole different conversation, right? So that's I guess a little bit of insight into some of the differences between New York and Texas. So overall, I'm happy that this part of Texas is better. I know that other parts of Texas, I'm talking to friends, associates in other parts of Texas that are still bad. I have one friend in the Houston area who told me the other day that they were out of vents. I think maybe they might be a week or two behind where we were at here in South Texas, so hopefully they're about to peak. Hopefully things get better there. Some other areas of Texas don't seem to be dealing with anywhere near as much acuity. It seems as if San Antonio may not be that bad. Austin, I'm not hearing terrible things there. I don't really know why one place gets really super bad and another one doesn't. But but that's also worthy of discussion. So what does it take to have this kind of bad stuff happen? So we thought, maybe it was about population density. Well, maybe now it's not. We thought that we see all these different things, and we're talking about social distancing and public transportation and social differences, and we're still not sure. But it does seem as if wherever these things pop up, it's secondary to things just kind of reach a critical mass. And think of it like a forest fire, maybe. You can have a forest fire that just kind of burns casually and it can burn itself out. And sometimes the conditions are such where the wind's coming from the right direction and the fire gets into a certain amount of fuel and the weather conditions are just right and things become unbelievably bad. And fires can actually create their own weather, and it can create its own wind. And these fires become self-sustaining, and I think that maybe some of the things that we're seeing here with the way this fire spreads might be similar. Once we reach a certain critical mass, transmission rates go up. Some of the complications that we see from people when they get super sick seem to get far worse, and that seems to be something that's happening. I don't know if it's a symptom of a larger issue or if that's what's actually driving this. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be a long time before we have a really good understanding of some of these things. But we know that it's happening. It's now happened in multiple places. It's happening in Florida. It's happening in other places in America. We know that it's happening. And so that kind of takes us to this whole big picture. We now know this can happen about anywhere, and we don't know where it's going to happen next. Unfortunately, I feel pretty certain that it will happen again next. Where is just the question. Where will the situation and the circumstances line up in such a way that this disease hits critical mass and then burns wildly out of control? I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen again. But we're seeing it happen in many states where many states are having issues where the case rate is getting worse quickly. We're seeing places where hospitals are filling up. And it's not just one isolated area. Now it's a lot of areas. So when you see a lot of areas having these issues, it only makes sense that the risk of having some place get really super out of control, the way it was here in South Texas, the way it's been in Florida, the way it was in New York, some of these other areas, it only makes sense that we're going to see more problems that are big and painful. Which also makes me think about some of the opinions and feelings that I've heard from other people. I had a discussion with a friend that I had from childhood the other day. A guy that I still care a lot about, whose opinions on this seem to be that he feels that, and I can try to give this the best, the fairest shake that I can, that policy and what people are being asked to do is based off of numbers that are fake or misguided or wrong with the intention of a political end. And to me that's really painful because there's no question about what happened in New York City. There's no question about what happened in Texas. There's no question about what happened in Florida. There's no question about what's happened in Italy. There's no question about what happened in China. There's no question about what happened in Iran. There's no question about what's happening in Brazil, in Mexico, and all of these different places, and the suffering and the carnage that is happening worldwide secondary to this virus. It's not debatable. Ultimately, the numbers and the testing doesn't mean shit. It really doesn't. And the information that we're trying to gather is a tool. It's a tool to lend to understanding, to help us stop the suffering and stop the spread. It's information that we use, that we take the things that we learn, the things that we see, and we try to compile it to get the best big picture that we can to mitigate risk, to limit the suffering. And somehow, here we are in America. We like to talk about American exceptionalism and all of these wonderful things that we have and how we're the greatest country on earth and how we're the smartest country and how we do all these wonderful things. And somehow, pretty much every other country on earth has done a better job at this than we have. And it makes my head hurt that we have people who want to scream about their rights. And yeah, sure, you have rights. You have the right to be as stupid as you want to be. It's one of the founding American principles of self-determination and liberty and all that, right? But I don't see a lot of people going out screaming, I demand the right to go drive drunk as I want to. Because when you drive drunk, you're not just taking your own life into your hands. You're putting everybody else at risk too. You don't have the right to walk into a crowded movie theater and shout fire. You don't have that right. You don't have, you're putting other people at risk. You don't have the right to dump your toxic waste in somebody else's river, stream, or pond. You're putting other people at risk. We're not asking for a lot here. We're asking about trying to make subtle changes to help reduce and limit and mitigate the spread of a disease that is killing people in horrific ways. So if your issue is about that you expect or you have a desire to see perfect numbers, ideal information, just know that's not possible. It's not. This is something that's happening in the moment. This is a new virus. As far as we are into this, we're still like 6 months, right? 8 months into this whole thing. It's a novel virus that's less than a year old. It takes time to get understanding of all this stuff. We still have debates about what happened with swine flu, H1N1, from over a decade ago, and the things that we learned from that. It took us some time to come to grips with and learn and take that information and build a reliable understanding of what happened there. And it's going to take us time and some work to understand what's happening here. And this is a far more complex, far nastier disease that is going to be far harder to work out. So if your expectation is these people are lying to me, they can't give me the right numbers, these tests, you're right. You're right. But what's the bottom line? The bottom line is we have to act on the best information we have to provide to the public the most protection that we can. And are we talking about absolute certainty? There is no absolute certainty. So yeah, it's what you're asking for is not reasonable. It's just not. So we have to kind of reel in some of these expectations that we have from watching TV shows, where no matter what the medical level of complexity is, you have an answer in 45 minutes and a resolution at the end of the show at 1 hour. That's not real life. That's not reality. And if your idea is that people like me, or Dr. Fauci, or some governor who wants to tell you that we have a responsibility to try to mitigate some of this risk, if you think that we're obviously lying to you, I'm not going to convince you otherwise. You can be as willfully ignorant as you want to be. You can lie to yourself all you want, but guess what? Look at the scoreboard. Scoreboard says America's losing. The scoreboard says America is singular in its ability to screw this up. And still, we don't have enough testing. We don't have enough PPE. We don't have all these things that should be pretty easy at this point. We don't have. Why is that? It's ridiculous. So yeah, that's some shit in my opinion. So what's next? I don't know what's next for America. I've been calling the alarm on this since January. I've been trying to point out to people that this was super risky, that this was scary, that the way China was talking versus the way China was acting, how they were not congruent, how China said, oh, this is all under control, but they're fumigating the streets like it's the zombie apocalypse. I'm like, hey, we might want to pay attention to this. These people are saying this, but look at how they're acting. They're acting as if they're scared. You don't, I was like, these people have just shut down, like locked down, quarantined X number of cities with like 50 million people. You don't do that for something that's super simple and easy and under control. And it was loose at that point. At that time, we already had people in New York City. We had people in the Pacific Northwest. It was loose. It was in Italy. It was in Europe. It was in Iran, and it was loose in the world. And so now I've heard people talking about more travel restrictions. Guess what? Pretty much the number one travel restriction in the world right now is stopping people from America going other places, because we're the one place where it is just totally out of control. Woo! Surprise. We're number one. Yay, go us, right? So hopefully, the people who are thinking that this is, just bad public management come around to figuring out that, public health is really about public health. It's not like a political tool. The faster that we get this shit under control, the faster we can actually open up the economy and go and do the shit we want to do, and we can go watch a football game. You can go to your monster truck rally. You can go to your Monday Night Raw, WrestleMania. I don't know, whatever the hell it is people want to do. But if you want to get back to your big American life, you're going to have to come to grips with the fact that maybe some of these experts know what the hell they're talking about. Or we can keep on doing shit like sending 250,000 people to Sturgis and see what happens. Gee, I wonder what the outcome of that's going to be. Nothing could possibly go wrong there, right? Own libs, and assert your right to be as willfully ignorant as you want to be, and we'll see what happens. We're already seeing the scoreboard. I wonder what's going to happen. Well, what'll happen is I'll end up just going from hotspot to hotspot and keep doing these contracts, and I'll keep making these videos until people either figure it out or enough people die that we just figure it out and start locking shit down because people are too stupid to regulate themselves. I don't know. For me, I'm going home. I'm going to see my kids. I miss my kids dearly. Boy, do I miss Sam and Lou. Good boys. They've been sending me books, and they do like little comic books, and so that's good. And I talk to them every day, and so. But it's time for me to go home and see my boys. So, I'm going to take a much more leisurely stroll home than I did coming here. I drove pretty much 1,600 miles straight through. So, maybe stop off and see some friends on the way home, and just try to be good to myself. I'm about ready to go do some laundry. That way I can pack up clean laundry. I think I'm going to go to my new favorite restaurant in South Texas, Taco Palenque. Oh my God, it's delicious. That's just water. But I kept the cup, that way I'd have something to drink out of here in the room. But I'm going to get some of their guacamole salsa, because that stuff is delicious, and I'm going to get a couple of good tacos, and I'm going to gorge myself, and then I'm going to sleep some more, and I'm going to pack, and I'm going to get out of here. Take care of business back home and work some back there, fulfill my obligation to my home health system, who's been very gracious and letting me come out here and kind of work some of these crisis contracts. So it's about it for me, I guess. So I don't know if there will be more of these videos. I don't know if there will be more of this travel. I have to assume that we're not done with this. but it is what it is. So, um, in closing, I want to thank some of the folks that I've been here with. I still think think very highly of a lot of the frontline staff here. I'd mention names, but I'm sure I'd forget some. I've made some good friends here. People I care about. I think the administration pretty darn solid. I found an administration here that actually cares about trying to get their people what they need, and things that are really helpful versus things that are, seems like they have an appropriate focus on trying to fulfill needs that superseded their desire to look good in the public eye. I respect that. I like that. Some of the House supervisors, some of the cooler House supervisors I've seen in a while, pretty much all of them had a good bit of ER sympathy, and so that was nice. That was helpful. Overall, it's been cool. Hopefully I'm going to see my buddy that I went to grade school with, did a lot of youth sports with, and all around Renaissance man, my buddy Hans, who lives up in San Antonio. I'm going to see if he wants to go out and hang and do something on the way home. I might go over through Tennessee and see my buddy Doc, who's lives over in that area. Drive up through there. I don't know, maybe go up through Kentucky and maybe drop by the Corvette Museum track and see Matt. I want to see one of those new C8 Corvettes. Maybe touch one. That'd be kind of cool. And then get home. I had one friend who dared me to give them a shout out. L.A. She apparently watched this and she said, "Oh, you won't give me a shout out? Well, here's your shout out." So I expect dinner and or drinks at some point before too long. So you either cover the dinner or the drinks. I'll get the other. So look forward to seeing some other friends when I get home, and just laying around for a little bit. I think I might shop for a bed. I don't know. I think I deserve to get really good sleep when I get home. We'll see. But thank you guys. Appreciate it. If you have any thoughts, questions, feel free to post them up. Anything you want to know about, I'm happy to make some addendums here. But that's it for now. We'll see what else happens with all this. So, try to be good to each other. Try to talk to people about the reality of all of this, and maybe there's still hope for our nation that we can start focusing on some of these things in more intellectually honest and complex ways than some of the simple binary choices that we seem to make. So, but that's it for me. Here we are in the 8th month of 2020, and I'm done in Texas. I'm not unhappy about it. So, take care, everybody. Be well. Love you guys. See ya.